Retail stores have come and gone, and unfortunately a lot of them are closed down and they remain in the past in our memories, something that we went to growing up in perhaps a better time. So today on Top 3 Tuesday, I want to discuss my top 3 retail stores that have since closed.
Top 3 Tuesday, what will it be? Sit back, relax, and listen to me. It's Countdown Show. 1, 2, 3. It's Top 3 Tuesday, best day of the week.
Now I'm trying to keep this all to retail stores and not talk about game stores, kind of big department stores, if you will. So coming in at number 3 on my list is number 3, Caldor. Now, this was a big department store that had, clothing, toys, electronics, and all that. But I definitely remember going there with my dad and checking out G.I. Joes. Those are definitely a big part of my childhood growing up and, being able to go there and pick out an action figure. Getting a new G.I. Joe and just browsing through that. Also Transformers, that was kind of around the same time with all the toys coming out and some wrestling figures as well, but I usually always gravitated towards the G.I. Joe figures. And this was similar to other big box stores like a Bradley's, Kmart, something like that. So I'm not sure if it was everywhere all over the US, but that was some of my memories of going to Caldor's. And coming in at number 2 is another store that definitely stands out, and that is number 2, Service Merchandise. Not sure how many people heard of this. There was only, I think, one in my area. This is the old location here where my Service Merchandise was. Has since closed, and now the building is empty. But it was in walking distance from my house, so not having a car growing up, oftentimes I would walk there with my friends. And we would go in there, head over to the video game section, and I remember that they had a Super Nintendo kiosk there. And we were able to try out Super Mario World. So we would go there, multiple times a week and just play the video games. And it was also similar to where Toys R Us had a lot of the games behind a glass case. Service Merchandise did this as well. And you would kind of pick out your item and write it down on a piece of paper and go to your cashier to check out. And this was kind of a unique process that I never seen at any other retail store. But once you paid for your item, you would then go wait at the back of the store past the registers. There was a conveyor belt. Big old conveyor belt, and your product would come along on the conveyor belt and you'd have to wait. So you'd be looking at the other end like, is it coming out now? Am I getting my Super Nintendo or whatever item that you purchased? So you kind of hang out around there and pick up your item. I never seen that anywhere else. So they had people in the back, the warehouse, grabbing the items you bought, putting them on the conveyor belt and bringing them out to you. But being so close to my house, I visited the store a lot. But again, this store had a bunch of stuff other than toys and video games. They had clothing, electronics, jewelry, I guess, was really big. A lot of their commercials focused on their jewelry section. I had no reason to buy jewelry back then. It was all about toys, board games, video games, and all that. So that's why it stands out in my mind. Now, before we get to my number 1 retail store, I want to hear from some other content creators about their memories of stores in their past. So take it away.
So when you're talking stores that don't exist anymore, you have to talk about Circuit City.
Welcome to Circuit City, where service is state of the art.
Now, I grew up down in Florida. Circuit City was huge down there. I remember when I was a kid going there with my parents, and it was kind of like the Maze and the Minotaur, right? Where it's like the whole thing was set up like a honeycomb, and there's like a dead center section. And like that dead center section at my store was where like all the TVs and like the VHS players and like I assume eventually DVD players were. But the part I always tried to sneak my parents to was the back left corner. That's where like all the video games were. But you walk in the store in the bottom right corner and the whole thing's kind of like a big circle. And like I'd always try to, hey, let's just keep going. And they would always cut me back all the way back to the front. Like, of course you don't want the little kid to see the video games. But one thing I really remember about it though, that really stands out to me is when Circuit City was closing down. I was actually in like college, like just starting out in college, and we went to a Circuit City just to kind of like breathe in the nostalgia, like, oh, you know, let's just see what's going on here. And we go in and like there's nothing left. I mean, it's like one of the last days, absolutely nothing left except for this big basket of like bargain DVDs. And you know, when you think bargain DVDs, you know, they're in there, it's like $1 a piece. And we started sorting through and we quickly noticed that every single DVD in here, I'm talking maybe 100 or 200, were all Spawn. Every single one was a DVD for Spawn. But hey, that's my store, you know, Circuit City. I'll always love you. I wish I could have got some more stuff from you, and it was sad to see it go.
Oh, dude, yes, I totally remember Circuit City. The old store actually is still near me and has since then turned into a Savers. You could kind of still see the building, how the front of it looks like the Circuit City with the box kind of square look of the front of it. So I still go to the store as Savers, but going to Circuit City was definitely a good time. I got a lot of CDs there and, you know, like disc players, get your Discman, Walkmans, and all that. So I mostly went there for that. I don't think I got many video games at Circuit City, though.
So one store that I miss going to a lot is Sam Goody. So every summer, my older brother, my sister, and myself used to go up to New Jersey to visit my aunt and uncle. And they actually had a Sam Goody right next to one of their grocery stores. So every weekend, pretty much, we'd go grocery shopping, then they would let us go to Sam Goody, and we would either pick out some CDs or a movie. That's actually where I got my copy of Dragon Ball Z, The History of Trunks from, was from Sam Goody. And this is the same copy that I got from there. So what I miss about it so much is really just all the memories, because for pretty much my whole childhood, you know, we would go every weekend during the summer to Sam Goody and just pick out music or movies and even toys. And it just, you know, it just sucks that places like that aren't around anymore.
Sam Goody. I don't think I ever visited Sam Goody back in the day. My music stores was strawberries and coconuts. Very similar to what they sold, but I definitely remember going to those stores and, you know, seeing the VHS tapes of like animes and stuff like that as well, and again picking up CDs, compact disc. Almost items of the past.
Hey everyone, Gary here with Rock Solid Studios. Russ, thanks for having me on another one of your awesome videos. I really appreciate it. And if you are seeing this video, if you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, make sure you're following Russ because he does awesome stuff, even in spite of having people like me on his channel. So 3 stores that are no longer around that I wish still were. And I'm gonna go from like my least one to the one that I really wish was still around. The first one I wish was still around is a store in Wisconsin where I grew up called American of Madison. So think of it as like a Best Buy or a Circuit City before those existed, but above and beyond having like your home electronics, they also had furniture and stuff along those lines. My family shopped there for years and years and years, and the neat thing was a lot of times if you spent, and this is going back to like the early 80s, if you spent a certain amount of money, you would get a free bike from a local bicycle chain called Wheel and Sprocket. And I don't mean sprocket like from Fraggle Rock, I mean like the sprocket on a bike. Really unique that we had there. Now, when I moved here to Central Illinois, I actually found out they had a store about 2 hours away from me in Springfield, but they have shut down all locations as of about 10 years ago. The next 2 that I'm going to mention are both companies that I used to work for, actually. Number 2 is Suncoast Motion Picture Company, and this was a video store that had Blu-rays, DVDs, VHS, and the store that I actually ran was in the Brookfield Square Mall in Brookfield, Wisconsin, and we had some unique customers. Dustin Diamond was one of our regulars there, and he was, yeah, nobody liked dealing with Dustin. There were 2 guys who made a movie called American Movie that were from actually my hometown of Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, and they would go to the porn section. And I mean, if you've ever been to a Suncoast Motion Picture Company, you know that the porn section was like worse than going to a family video. I mean, it just, and we had to stock that stuff too, which was terrible. Those 2 guys were weirdos. But the number one store that I wish was still around, if you've got questions, I've got answers, and I am talking, I'm gonna come down, bring this down just a little bit here. Talk about Radio Shack.
Radio Shack. You've got questions, we've got answers.
I absolutely loved Radio Shack as a kid. I loved the RC cars that were there. I loved the computers that were there. I loved all the geeky stuff, the breadboards and the LEDs and the LCDs and the diodes, resistors. I think I still have my resistor color code card here somewhere. What I liked going into Radio Shack as a kid was the fact I could check out all that stuff. And as someone who became an adult that not only worked for the company, I managed a number of stores for the company, I actually really helped. I mean, the tagline for a long time was demystifying technology. And I liked helping people get the answers that they needed without having to spend an arm and a leg. And a lot of that is what I've tried to incorporate into my YouTube channel, quite frankly. But I mean, the coolest thing about that, I will say, is the fact that we had, and I know I'm rambling, Russ, I'm sorry, edit this out as you see fit. We had a program called RSU, Radio Shack Unlimited. And the neat thing about RSU was it was stuff that we didn't necessarily have in store, but we could get. So when the N64 came out, nobody could get them. I was selling them out of my store because I could get them through RSU. They would be drop shipped right to the customer. The PlayStation was the same thing. The PlayStation 2, the GameCube. I could get all this stuff and help gamers out, and they never even realized it at the time, or most didn't off the street. I was such a company man when I was racing my RC cars back in the late 90s and early 2000s. I had Radio Shack Sprint PCS all over the side of my personal RC race cars. Yeah, won a lot of races actually with those paint schemes on them. So those are my 3 stores that I wish were still around. Russ, who's next? And Russ, what you doing? Russ, what you doing? Russ, what you doing? Thought you were gonna away with it. Russ, what you doing? Let's find out.
Gary, I totally loved going to Radio Shack. That was actually right next to where Service merchandise was. It was in the same plaza, and me being a DIYer, I would always go there and get like LEDs and different project pieces that they sold. I would always go into the back of the store, and I actually had tamed one of the part bins that were in the store. They were closing up shop, and I was able to get one of these from my friend. He picked it up, my buddy Paul at Retro Gaming Arts, and he had no room for it, so he gave it to me. So I have a piece of Radio Shack history in my collection that I can put all my DIY parts in. But I would mostly go in there for that. But they had remote control cars, keyboards, and cool stuff like that, and I never purchased it, but I was, cool to look at and go in there. All right, guys, a number 1 retail store that we miss. Of course, it has to be
Number 1!
Toys R Us. Definitely a store of everyone's childhood, going there and getting presents, going there shopping for presents, toys, video games. It was everything a kid wanted, and you wanted to make sure your parents would bring you there and you can browse around. Now, this is my Toys R Us here. The building has since been shut down, of course, but you can still see the beautiful signage. The parking lot remains empty, but I was fortunate enough to head there with David Apuzzo a few years back when they just recently had closed, and I got a quick photo shoot with my car there because I figured my car, being a Mario car and very bright colored, fits well with Toys R Us. Now, I definitely remember going there with my dad and picking up video games. I distinctly remember getting Darkwing Duck on the Game Boy and bringing it home, playing it on my Game Boy, beating it so fast that I wanted to get another game, so we tried to go back and return it and tell them I already had the game, but they would only swap it for the same game. I couldn't get store credit. We were trying to be sneaky.
I don't want to grow up, 'cause baby, if I did, I couldn't be a Toys R Us kid.
Once a Toys R Us kid,
Always a Toys R Us kid.
But yeah, browsing the aisles of Toys R Us with the little slips that they had for the video games, and you'd be able to pull it out and bring it up and go to the little like shack area where they kept all the video games and they retrieve that for you, or just checking out all the toys. Again, they had G.I. Joes, Ninja Turtles, Transformers, Lego, all the great stuff, just browsing up and down the aisles. It was definitely a great place to go and hang out, and when I grew older, I would go there to get presents for maybe some of my younger cousins or friends who had kids and I wanted to get some awesome toys, I'm like, I'm going to Toys R Us. And I want to give a super thanks to everyone that participated in this. There'll be links in the description down below to all their channels if you guys want to check them out and support them as well. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I put out weekly videos. And as always, gamers, I'm RussLyman, and keep your world fun bit by bit. I'll see you next video.
And I want to give a super shout out to all my Patreon supporters: Dan Buchanan, Joey Ellis, George Sandoval, Joseph Riviera, Nintendo, Joe Sheevy, David Apuzzo, Maynard, Brian Culpepper, TechWizX, Matthew Hannigan, Alex Kaz, Ayan Oshi, Gannon, and all my Patreon supporters. Link below if you want to join, and I'll see you later.